Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show about parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Miles, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts Keith Bogan.
Top of the morning to you, sir.
Doug Hamadite.
Howdy.
And Chad Holloway.
Good morning.
Today, we're going to be talking about pretty much something that we all agree is over my dead body. And that is, which actually, if that dog barks again, will probably be happening. A dead body on this show. Anyway, now we're going to be talking about the concept of being approached by our children, having them say that they are joining the military. It is pretty topical with what many thought we were on the brink of World War III. Now it seems like everybody is laying off hands and trying to let the Ukraine do their own thing, which they seem to be getting progressively better at. But anyway, who wants to kick us off?
I may have the easiest road because with all due respect to Linda, I'll have the easiest road because my kids will say, "Fuck you, no way. I'm not joining the military." So I don't even have to worry about it. It's not going to happen. There'd be no voluntary service for my kids.
I was just going to say, yeah. No, I was thinking that, Keith is already beyond that, but I'm sure he has plenty of insight and vision into the subject. But I don't know. I just think that it was an interesting think through, the past day or two. Just thinking about that and how I come from my mom's side of the family is big military, big Marines type thing. And growing up, my dad, drafted and stuff like that. And our sense of military service has always been Platoon, Hamburger Hill, Chuck Norris, and Rambo, which I don't think today's envision is really what the military is. But when we think about it, we always think of like these civil wars where it's people lining up on one hill versus people against another group, which obviously it's not today. And there's always that thing when you get into high school and you're like, man, college is so expensive. How am I going to pay for this? And you say to yourself, well, I could go in the military and they can give me my $10,000, towards school, and I could do some learning. But I think the person that goes into the military is not the person that comes out of the military. And that's got to be one of the things that a parent has to deal with and think through. So it would be a very interesting conversation. But I think that the people that are cut out and want to go into the military are have a very focused kids. I think it's something that you could probably tell as a parent, for the most part. And then the rest of them, I mean, it might be, a good reason for them to go, to get your life straightened out or something, because of the idea of background and just that they're going to really, overhaul your life. So, yeah, it could be great for some people, but for me and the way I think of things, I'm not a war person, nor, believe in taking another life. So for me personally, and I would let my children know that. I mean, and I'm pretty sure they would know that even before if they raised the conversation, in the end, that is where you could potentially go to, so.
But I guess from my perspective, my stepdad and then his dad were in the military, and but my stepdad never saw any action. I guess he was in Germany, went through training and everything, and they had orders to go. My understanding of the process was that he had orders to go the next day to Vietnam, but then they changed them that day, and he went back to the States. So he never saw any active military duty, but he went through the training and all those kinds of things and was prepared to do that. And from my perspective up front, have a great deal of respect because these people put their lives on the line, I'd say more than most people when they go into the military, because you go into military for war, right? And war, from my perspective, like I've said to you guys many times, I prefer peace, but to be peaceful, I think you have to have, I heard somebody say the other day, overwhelming force, but I would say be prepared for war, because that, just face it, there's some bad actors in the world today. But Frankie's never said anything about going into the military. My preference is that he would not, and I don't know that he would. He's not an aggressive kid like that, and would not necessarily be, I think, a good candidate for them. Although I think some of the things that they do now with drones, maybe he would be, because I can see him sitting in a game chair with his controllers, putting the drone over, going, okay, here we go. And I think it's much different. If there were war now, obviously excluding World War III, I think war is much different than it was, 50 years ago in Vietnam. I don't think they're in the trenches and they're not fighting hand to hand and climbing down tunnels, chasing tunnel rats, I think
Or being in the
and I know
middle
that
of-
there are people that do that. I remember in the Iraq war, there was a kid that went to my gym, young guy, super smart, super friendly, just seemed like he had everything going. And he went to that war, and he was in, I don't know if it was a special team. I don't know what it was. I don't know if he was a SEAL or what level, but he drowned. He drowned in one of the rivers. I think it was the Tiger River or the Tigris River, crossing with two of his buddies. They were going in, I think, before everybody else. And I think his pack weighed him down and drowned him. So, there's definitely, I think, a place for that. And there are definitely people who need to go in, like Doug was saying, people that have to be focused on, I'm a military guy. Here's an example. One of Frankie's buddies, his dad has been in the military. His mom was in the military. He's in the military. And it was funny, over the summer, I saw him go from a beanpole, and he started working out and training, and he was running from a beanpole to this like muscular kid. I'm like, oh my God, I just can't believe the change in his life. But that's how the kid grew up, is that he grew up wanting to follow in his mother's and father's footsteps. And I think he'll be a great addition to the forces. He's smart and he's physically fit. And I think there's kind of this other type that, like, as Doug was saying, that kind of needs some direction. I had one of my best friend's brothers was having some problems out of high school, just getting in trouble and stuff. So his dad said, hey, you need to go in the military here for a few years, and they'll get you straightened out here. They'll give you some discipline, and you'll get your head on your shoulders straight. And that's what he did. And it worked amazing for him. I don't know if he ever saw any, I don't think he ever saw any combat time or anything, but I know it was a good thing for him. So, and then kind of my thought process going through this was, I'm not really an order taker, and I'd be going, well, why do we have to do this? Wouldn't it be better to do this? So I would not be fit for the top down hierarchy of the military. Certainly there, I could envision a time where I might voluntarily do it, but again, that has to be a time when I feel like there's some rights, when our rights are taken to be for the greater good. So.
Well, I part of it is you brought up Hamburger Hill in that, Doug. The vision of the military movies changed after that. What they've done with military movies, and obviously it's because of what has happened with this country in war since then, especially Vietnam. I mean, it came to light of the change of the military style of movie. Yeah, Rambo, but if you remember the first one, he's a returning Vietnam vet, and the treatment that he goes through is what leads him to Rambo, to First Blood, basically. Another good example is Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket is clearly a different movie, different because of what happened in Vietnam as opposed to World War II. But a good example of the World War II movies that kind of turn a new light is Dunkirk. They turn that in, they spin a new light on World War II as well. Now, I mean, they're more, the stories haven't changed because, I mean, Black Hawk Down, the American Sniper, obviously, we know what happened to Chris Kyle in the end. Things like that. You get a lot more individualistic stories, but they're even in for wars like we had in the first war in Iraq and things like that. There's been some movies, and Somalia, there have been like Black Hawk Down and things like that that came out. Clearly, the portrayal of what happened in those places isn't quite what really happened. We're finding out. And now I think for I'm not saying this is only pertinent to Doug and I with the ages of our kids. I'm not saying that Frankie and Jeremy and Justin are aged out, but especially in Justin's case, at 22, it's much less likely at this point that somebody who's 22 would turn around and join the military as somebody who's opposed 17 or 18. I think even Frankie and Jeremy would be their age would be less likely to join the military at this point, especially being in college already. Many saw that as a quote unquote excuse for Vietnam, of being in college. But I like, for me, again, I'm along the lines of Doug when it comes to war. Yeah, it's a necessary wrong or a necessary situation sometimes, but it doesn't mean that it's the right situation for would be the right situation for my kids. In this, especially in this climate that we're in now, things obviously could change over the next 7 or 8 years, and in Sadie's case, 10 years. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. I personally would be against it, but it's a bridge that, to me, it's kind of, if they came to me and said it, I'd be, first off, quite surprised. Second off, my first reaction would probably be no way. So
Chad brought up a very interesting point, and that is my gamer son Jeremy at the age of 20. I could actually see him, if it became a worldwide conflict, I could see Jeremy contributing to the programming aspect of defending the country, not attacking people, but creating defensive lines, especially defending on the hacking side, not so much creating drones to attack and kill other people. But he hasn't learned nearly enough to do the hacking stuff yet, but he'll be one of those kids for sure. Not hopefully not to do it, but to understand it. And the closest I could ever see him doing is in being enlisted in the effort to help prevent hacking, which, by the way, we're heavily under attack right now for that, but not enough for them to start drafting college kids who don't know how to program. Both of my kids believe very much in the defense of humanity, not so much the country, and nothing against this country, but they believe in human life. They believe that we have enough ways of killing each other, that war is just inexcusable in many circumstances. If it were to come to these shores, I don't think that my sons would hesitate to pick up weaponry and defend their homes and defend their families and defend their people here. But I'm not, they're certainly not going to be volunteering to pick up weapons. You would, and this is, I'm a little concerned, and I think there's a growing fear in this country that this will escalate into something much more than Russia against Ukraine. And that it'll, once across NATO lines, which almost seems inevitable in the next two or 3 weeks. Once it crosses the NATO lines, things are going to get a lot uglier. And countries like the United States will be involved in what's going on.
Well, that will be, that will definitely be, obviously be us going there. I don't see,
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
not to the extent of we're going to be, that's going to draw us to take arms here. If it does, it's going to be a situation where it's like what happened on September 11th, and then it's going to be response. It's not going to be, and he is in no shape or form right now with what he's got his hands full with Russia, with the Ukraine as it is. No way he's doing it. Going to try to do anything here and provoke us.
Well, when you're as insane as the leadership in Russia is, you do a lot of stupid things that you and I would think would be crazy. With that said, the one thing I will disagree on is and with all apologies to Chad, I don't think Frankie, Justin, or Jeremy are too old. I think that if the conflict escalates, it's not just going to be the 18-year-olds. It's going to be the 18 to probably 25 and even 30-year-olds who might get drafted.
I just think that it was interesting. I don't want to like get hung up on the facts or anything of this statement, but there were just some of the numbers coming out with the casualties of the Ukraine incident currently, that the amount killed there is like, I don't know, whatever, which would equal like all the people that we've lost like during our like our multiple years, in the Middle East and all. And it's just amazing that, well, it's not amazing. I mean, it like if you were to say, like think about it. I mean, it's loss of life is loss of life, but just the fact that we do it so well, let's say militarily, it's just like unbelievable, that I think it would be a very different war with, the United States as part of it, with the way that tactically we handle these things.
I got a question, Keith. This is it's not, kind of not off topic, but off topic. The gentleman that was walking behind you, you mentioned that was a friend from Virginia. Was that the friend that you went to his military retirement?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's
Okay,
her.
because I know you said you went to Virginia for a military retirement. Now it's
Yeah,
just,
that was a couple of years ago.
ironic.
We're all from the same activity. My friend Steven here is one of the parents from the Drum Corps activity, and so is Herb, the guy who retired from the military a couple of years ago. So I have my friend Steven and Katrina are here visiting for a couple of days, but no, it's different people.
Okay, sorry about that. No, well, we thought that the draft was going to be reinstated. We've heard this a couple of times where it was going to happen, and I honestly thought it was going to happen when they invaded Afghanistan and then the war spilled over into Iraq. I thought that was when the draft was going to be reinstated. I'm praying we don't get to that point now, because you want to talk about the fracture of this country. It's only going to get worse.
There's one key difference between Afghanistan and Ukraine, and that is Afghanistan, it was Russia and the United States using their pawns to smack each other around. In this conflict, Russia is directly involved. And that's the danger. That's why this one could be so very, very different than what's going on, what went on years ago.
Not really. I wouldn't say that was Russia using their pawns, because you got to remember they got bitch slapped out of Afghanistan in the 1980s.
but
mute.
it wasn't Russia themselves in their fighting. God damn it.
Yeah, but they still got bitch slapped
In
out
the
of Afghanistan.
1980s, I think it was.
Right. Well, there was Russian troops helping Afghanistan. It wasn't the entire, 100,000, 150,000 Russian troops did not flood across the border in that case.
No, they weren't.
There's much more direct involvement. There's much heavier involvement in what Russia's doing now. And we also have a leadership there that clearly has lost its marbles. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it. They are. I've done some studying of who Putin was when he took power, and his roots and his thinking. And there's so many people in Russian leadership who look at him and say, "Who is this guy? He's not the guy we put in power 20 years ago."
Yeah, he was a logical thinking ex-KGB.
And he's no longer that. He's completely deranged right now, and it's very obvious that he's lost his marbles.
Much along the lines of George Bush, the first of George Bush, H.W. Bush. He was very similar to him. So yeah, when they voted for him, that's who they voted for. Absolutely. There was many comparisons to Bush when Putin first took power. Yeah. You're right. He was a completely different man than he is now. But he's drunk with power, and that's a huge part of it. And it has caused. I also, like you said, I think he also is mentally deteriorating. So that's even more dangerous. And I think it was the same thing with Saddam Hussein. Before we captured him, I think he was mentally deteriorating also after, in that time frame of losing the first war and the invasion of Afghanistan after 9/11. He had lost.
You're right on my track. You're right on my track. All of these leaders take power, have a certain amount of promise for the people that they take power for, but none of them has been the leader of a superpower whose mental deterioration has threatened the entire planet. Because Afghanistan has never been able to threaten the entire planet. Iraq has never been able to threaten the entire planet. Even North Korea, with all their belly aching, has never been able to threaten the entire planet. Russia and the United States are the only two powers that can truly do that. And we've never had a leader of one of those two countries who's been so mentally deficient and so deranged to actually start a war. Even our last president wasn't that crazy. He was crazy in other ways, but we're not going to talk about that here. He was, but he never even came close to touching the button, we hope. This guy in Russia, this is why I'm very concerned for like the next 4 weeks, because I think he realizes he's getting his ass kicked. And if we're ever going to have to institute a draft and get involved directly in a war, I think we're looking, sometime by the end of April is the really defining moment of whether or not that's going to happen.
I would agree. I think that since he's losing and he's not doing what they expected, I think he's even more vulnerable to some sort of nuclear attack as well. I think because he's desperate. He's getting down because he is losing. And I think when you get back and he's backed himself into a corner, he's been off more than he can chew. And, at this point, I think he could go off at any time, and it does. I don't think it matters if we give MiGs or if we go directly into the Ukraine or any of that stuff. I think that us helping them, like we can say, oh, well, we're just giving them this, so that doesn't apply. I don't think that matters to him. I mean, I don't think it would matter to me. It'd be like, you're involved too. You might not be your soldiers shooting at my guys, but it's your guns or your missiles or whatever it is. So we can kind of couch it however we want, but I don't think I don't think that matters. And then I guess the second question I was going to raise, and I don't know enough about it, but my understanding now is that women have to register for the draft as well. Is that correct? You guys know?
Yeah.
So if we had a
believe so,
draft,
yeah.
it would probably be, I don't know, would they draft women too? I mean, I guess in theory, yes, but I don't know. That'd be an
You know how
interesting.
many women would scream if they didn't? It's all about
Well, the idea-
equality. And I don't mean to mock it, but you know, I think the women would be, many women would want to be drafted just as readily as the men. And they are even going to hide behind, oh, we're women, you should draft the men first. That's not going to happen these days.
I don't
I'd
know. I
say
guess
it's
I
wrong.
get the feel I get is a little different than that, but
Well, I think, remember, when you get drafted, you also have to pass a physical and you have to pass certain strength abilities. You know, you have to demonstrate certain abilities. And not to be sexist about it, but many women may fail that. A lot of men fail that.
But they
So
changed the
I think
rules
a
for
lot
the
of women
women.
might be eliminated from military service anyway because of that.
But the military's already made it easier for a lot of women for different tests of strength.
Yeah,
And
the
I thought
standards
that
are
they,
different.
what?
The standards are different. They're
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
different
yeah,
standards.
that's what I mean. I think that it's also terrible I think that we should be protecting women and children, but whatever, that's my own uh feeling. And
Chivalry ain't dead. Good.
I thought that it failed, the thing to draft women in the Senate.
Um, we should
I don't
almost
know.
look at it.
I
I
think in
don't
the
know.
end,
I was just thinking that's where we were, but
I know
Give me
it
one.
came up and all, and it was pretty strong, but then I think in the end, I thought it failed.
It's very interesting, this conversation. The real danger only applies to my kids and Chad's kid. That's it. Your kids, thank God, are too young. You know, and obviously Jason's girls are too young too. Yeah, I think that right now Chad would be Chad. Yeah, Chad's in good enough physical shape. He could go too, but Frankie and Justin and Jeremy would be snapped up in a heartbeat if they instituted the draft. Absolutely.
when I remember one of my college professors, and this was back probably in the 80s, and he was talking about Vietnam, and he said he was protesting, and he grew up in Chicago and was protesting at the DNC and that stuff, and was talking about that. And he goes, let me tell you, he says, because I asked him, I said, well, why were you against the war? And he goes, once enough of your friends go to war, once it's like enough for your friends to go to war, and they come home in body bags, you get tired of it. He says, you go to enough funerals at 19, 20 years old, he says, you're done. Jason, do you have a question for the class?
It was dropped.
It was dropped.
Dropped in
Okay.
December.
Interesting.
Yeah, they dropped it December 6th or something like that of last year. So no, women are not drafted in the military.
Okay. Thanks for checking on that.
Yep, we should have thought about that. Probably researched it before we started, but it was a quick enough look up, thank God.
Came up in conversation.
It's much more fun to just freelance this stuff and not know what we're talking about going in. I like it that way.
But now, Keith, on the flip side of your coin, if there is a draft, will women be protesting that? Say, we want to be drafted too?
There will be some women who do. It may not be a whole movement, but I'm sure there'll be some women, and even if they're not drafted, I'm sure there'll be some women who, you know, obviously volunteer.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. Women
Then
will.
assuming there's a planet left after any kind of conflict, then they'll be hell to pay after the war. Like, why weren't we in the draft and all that? And a huge movement for that too. Yeah, it makes sense too. I mean, I'm actually shocked that they got rid of the draft. I don't understand it. You know, for the women, you would think that a lot of people would have been screaming about that, but on December 6th, there was enough knowledge of what was coming that I wonder if our government decided this is the time to protect our women, which seems almost backwards in given the direction we're trying to go in. But anyway.
When I remember hearing stories from my grandparents about World War II, and my grandpa had some sort of health condition, so he wasn't able to go in, something with his legs, and he had a real bad infection one of them, so it was a bad leg. But they had all the women were working in the factories. Like I would say my grandma was in some sort of munitions factory, and that's actually where they met, I believe, is my grandma was making bullets of some sort in a munitions factory, and my grandpa was there like resetting machinery and stuff like that for them.
Yeah, my ex-wife wouldn't have to go to a factory to make bullets. She can just laser beam with her eyes. I mean,
Oh, God, please don't go down that road.
So we're gonna send your ex-wife over to Ukraine. She's gonna walk around towering over the
mean-
buildings with her laser eye focus. Right?
What's
the,
it,
Laser
the
eye.
war would be over. The war would be over in seconds. It'd be great.
What is she, Mecca Streisand?
My neighbor, she's 91. She'll tell you about how she was her family was the people that were also would be able to black out the town, and that they would run tests here. And they also were the people that would count the planes and take the numbers of the planes and check and make sure that they were United States planes flying over Pennsylvania and stuff. So yeah, she's got a pretty interesting history there with that.
Wow.
Is that the one who has the 8 ring washers?
Yes, it is. Yep.
See, I do pay attention. Sometimes. He mentioned it on the show a couple of, oh God, well over a year ago, we were talking
Yeah.
about something. And he mentioned a neighbor that had 8 ring washers in her house.
Yep, she still uses them.
91, huh?
Yep.
You were talking about the recipes that she has. I can only imagine if we could ever get them together and get it
Yep,
into some
she's-
kind of format.
She's the one to
If
make.
she has all these recipes, why isn't she in the food group? I mean, come on, Jason, you're looking real good again.
Yeah, somebody had to go downstairs and get clothes and doesn't have any on. So
God, it's not you.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know about the military, but I mean, all the things that they do that we probably aren't aware of beyond the, the war and stuff like that. I assume that there's like lots of, things that they do, like the engine corps and stuff like that with dam building and stuff. And I think maybe they could be better utilized in this country, as a workforce when doing more. But I don't know. So
Well,
maybe
I
they're
think that they do use them. I know that like when I lived in St. Louis, that all like the dams and all that kind of stuff in that area where they were managed by the Army Corps of Engineers.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I just think that they could probably do more, when it comes to infrastructure in the country,
Yeah.
So building that up, I mean, I hate to say free labor, but
They're being paid.
I know. But, so yeah, but
Yeah,
So,
and I guess it's one of those things, I guess, from my perspective too, that it's just like I'm not a big fan of the military. I again, to restate I mean, I think it's necessary for me. For other people, if they want to join, that's great. And I know that people have made military careers for themselves, and I have a great deal of respect for people who do join the military. But from my perspective, it's like if I'm walking down the street and I see an injustice with somebody, I want to right that justice. I want to take care of that, right? I want to do something. And it's the same if something gets on a big enough scale, not that I would want to join, but if it was a big enough injustice, I would help. I would do it as well. I would help in some way. And I think that's how Frankie is, but I don't know. We haven't talked that much about joining, but I think he hasn't grown up with the wars that we have seen. I don't believe, I think we've kind of, for him, Vietnam for him is like World War II for us, I think. And World War II is is a big deal.
well, to an extent, I would say if there was any war that, and I mean, as much as some of us rail on the media, I think that the media portrayal of Vietnam brought a lot to light of what truly goes on. And I think it changed a lot of perspective, and it changed perspective on treatment of people who were in the military in this country, because I mean, we saw how the Vietnam vets were treated when they came back.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, for me, not firsthand, but I had family that was in Vietnam, and you know, one cousin of my father's died very, very young from what it was obviously Agent Orange poisoning.
Yep.
He had cancer everywhere by the time he passed away. And it was because of his involvement in Vietnam and direct exposure to Agent Orange. We've seen the treatment, still seeing the treatment of the military from Vietnam. And to an extent, in this country, we've seen it in Vietnam with in the treatment of people involved in 9/11. So it's on a different scale there. Yeah, there's a lot going on with that it's been unusual, not unusual, but the perspective of joining the military has changed since we've seen these things go on.
You know, Chad was talking a little while ago about you know, respect for the military and wouldn't necessarily join it. You know, certainly, I'm almost in awe of someone who does it at times. But my sons, I think, and I would have to ask them this to be sure, but I think that they've drawn a linkage between police in this country and military in this country, because they all represent forms of protecting the citizenry, if you will. And as much as I have tried to teach them to respect all of that, but my son's generation in general has a very limited respect for law enforcement, particularly police. And the George Floyd situation, not to go down that path, but the George Floyd situation has really exposed how much people in the age group of Justin and Jeremy think that police are completely effed up in this country and it needs to be blown up and rebuilt. The way we protect our citizenry, at least, the way we monitor that sort of thing. So I think that transfers to the military, where they also believe, you know, with all the sex scandals and the abuse scandals and all that, that they kind of look at it in the same way, that the military structure is so poor, and leadership is so power has grabbed so much power that they don't have the respect for it that it probably deserves. With that said, I do remember, I'm not a guy who would volunteer for the military either, but I remember having very strong conversations with both of them as each approached college. Given our financial situation after all the stuff that went on with my divorce and all that, they were in a position where they were responsible for paying for their own college. I contributed as much as I could, and I handled about a year of each of their colleges, but all the rest of it comes from student loans, which technically it's their job to pay them back. And I always said I would try to help them with it, but so when we sat down and started talking about college for each of them, I said, look, you have an option. You could do ROTC, get the whole thing paid for. And both of them didn't just shoot the idea down. I probably shouldn't phrase it that way. They didn't reject it out of hand, but it was not an interest of them at all. And I said, these are the numbers you're up against if you decide to go and do that. And both of them said it's not worth being part of the military in order to just pay for college. They'd rather pay for college. So it was a concerted decision. It wasn't necessarily oh, I hate the military, I'm not going to think about it. It's just not my thing. It's not something I want to get involved in, even for the money.
Right. So I have to apologize for a second. I actually had to call my father. My father was calling about something for work. Sorry, I apologize for that. It's been a morning of phone calls apparently. So anyway, it was actually his cousin who, and I remember visiting him a couple of years before he died. So that's why it was also fortuitous that as I'm talking about this, my father's calling me. But yeah, I want to go back to something that Chad brought up. And I think it's a valid point and very interesting of soldiers maybe not being on the front lines. And Keith, you mentioned it with Jeremy, which I think would be another thing. In this day and age of computers and things like that, the people who work the computers and things like that are one of the first lines of defense for us. Because I mean, they coordinate attacks and things like that through computers as well. And then, like you said, the drones flying in almost like a kid is playing a video game. It went. I mean, we've all seen the movie War Games, I'm sure. The old Matthew Broderick movie. That's pretty, very, very true now, if you think about it. And things like that can be hacked. What a strange time we live in, where you think like fictitious movies like War Games and Project X and things like that. And here we are in 2022, and well, here you go. I'm actually surprised that there hasn't been a movie made about or something, made about using almost like video game systems in military. Very surprised that has it. Yeah, usually Hollywood is on top of things like that. I'm surprised it hasn't come across.
I think there was one that Frankie had watched, and this was a few years ago. I don't think it was directly like military on Earth, but I think there was a part of it where they had recruited this kid, and they had said that like his trial to see if he could make it into this group was he had to do some sort of function where they were fighting others, but it ends up that wasn't actually a test for him to get in. That was like the real thing. But I can't remember what it was, but I remember we watched it. It was a little off the edge for me, but I know Frankie enjoyed it. But I don't think it gained a lot of I don't think it was very popular. But it was along those lines.
Right.
Sure.
So what were your experiences? Doug, I know you kind of mentioned you came from a military family, your mom's side, your mother's side. Chad, you mentioned your stepfather. And what were your guys' thoughts personally in a military service? You kind of went into, but go into it a little, in depth. For me, it was during the 9/11 post wars. I thought about it for a time there at one point. Had I been a couple of years younger, I probably would. I might have. But I was 24 at the time, 23, 24 at the time when I had thought about it. And it was kind of like, at that point, it was like, I don't know how much good I would be to somebody military, for somebody's army or anything like that. My mind, yes, but my body, not so much. I don't know if I physically could have done it. So mentally, yeah, I would have in a strategic room, yeah, I probably could have done pretty well. But physically, no. So that kind of was like, yeah. Or I probably would have made could have made a hell of a run in communications in military. So what were your thoughts here? Well, we've got about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I
Well,
was just gonna.
oh,
Oh,
go
I
ahead,
was just
Doug.
gonna. I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say, yeah. We came up with a strong military. I always saw my uncles and stuff, and was very proud of them. They also had John Wayne posters in the living room, and my uncle Pete, he still is a lifelong career Marine, and I mean, very proud of him and all. And for a time, my neighbor down the street, who was my best friend at the time, Jason, was going to did go into the military for a linguist. And he made it very popular, at Cedar Ridge at the time. And I was like, oh, pretty interested in that, way to pay for school, like I said, until they showed up at my house. And then that was like, whoa, okay, that's kind of real. I was like, yeah, I don't know, guys, and they went through the whole thing with me and my family and sat us down, and this is what we could offer you. And, we could bump you up if you sign up now. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that, guys. And then it got really weird is when they showed up at my work, when I worked at the pizza place. They pulled into the parking lot there. And I was just like, yeah, these guys have stepped over the line. You're not for me. And that was the point where it's like, yeah, these guys went a little bit too far. And I was like, yeah, stop, leave me alone. And then they would still like show up like in my area. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And this goes back to like some of the recruiting tactics, which nowadays I think they don't do, or maybe even be against the law. So I don't know. But that was that. But the only time that I thought about it again, and not in the sense of signing up, was moving here. And what Jason was saying, talking to my neighbor, like I said, he died of Agent Orange and the cancer, and how the government, well, how the people treated him, and how the government continued to treat him after coming home. And it wasn't until like nearly when he died did he get full benefits for a man who had Agent Orange, like you said, through his throat, his arms, his stomach. Like it was terrible. Like, way to go.
Yeah, and
But
I'd like to just have a side comment here. Doug had mentioned earlier that the military is so good at their tactics. We can go in and we can beat Saddam's army in 24 hours or whatever it is, when he's got 1 million soldiers, or we can do those things so good. We can move a giant group of people and their equipment from one location to another. But then on the back end, when they come home, first society doesn't treat them well, and then within the veterans healthcare system, that is not having that much. I would say the stuff I've read, the stuff I've heard, is that is just such a mess. And why isn't that ran the same way that they run the operations on the front end? It seems like there'd be it just seems like they deserve it, and they go in with that benefit when they come out, but it's not really a benefit for many of them, I believe, because it's just operated so bad. But moving on to kind of what happened to my family, obviously, we have a great deal of respect for the military. When I was younger, we'd play war zones and stuff. We'd pretend that we were in the military, and we had thoughts of going in the military and those kinds of things. My parents never said anything like positive or negative really about it, but the sentiment that was built was one of positivity. Like look what during World War II, look how the military, our military, really went in and kind of turned the tables in World War II, and we liberated all these people. My stepdad was always talking about the Germans and the Nazis and the negative things they had done, and why we needed to go in there and do that stuff. We have to liberate and all this kind of stuff. So during this time, I had a very positive, and I still do, a very positive view of the military. But then as you get older, then you go, oh, it's just not playing military. You can really die from this stuff. And in addition, there are these other things, like maybe you go in and it's what I consider a legitimate purpose was World War II, but then maybe it's something like Vietnam, where then you hear other other sides to the story, like it was for resources, or like even in the Middle East, where, oh yeah, we're not fighting for people. The reason we're there is because of oil. So there become this kind of mixed signals, that sometimes the military is not always used, or the military is not always used for helping people in the best purposes to prevent harm to others, if you will. It can be used for taking resources and stuff like that. Kind of like Putin is doing with Ukraine now. He's moving in there, and it's like for resources and for who knows what he thinks is part of Russia. But it's uncalled for. It's kind of my opinion of that. So, but once I got older, I see these things, these kind of conflicts coming up about, oh, it's not just fun. You can die. It's sometimes it may be great if you go and you die for a good cause, but you could also die for something stupid some politician wants to stick you in the middle of. And that's where it gets kind of wound up. And I opted for other things other than the military. And like you guys, I was a little older than you all, but during 9/11, man, that made a huge impression on me. And I was like, somebody needs to pay for this.
Yeah.
And it's that's one of the injustices that I've seen, that I go, yeah.
I was when they invaded Iraq was where I kind of started to go, what are we doing? That was where it was kind of like, why? What are we doing here now? Then it was kind of like, okay, they're kind of just, that was the point at which I said, well, if I join, there's a chance they send me where I'm wondering why they're in there. So yeah, let's not do that. Keith?
For me, I grew up in a world where by the time I was 10, that was about the time we were exiting Vietnam. And it was long since determined that we should never have been there, that it was a huge mistake, that we were meddling in other countries and just trying to control, install our own dictators and whatever, our own leadership. I grew up in an era where MASH, the show MASH, really shone a light on what was going on in a Korea that I never knew, because it was before I was born. Well before, thank you. So it was a great anti-war, anti-military thinking by the early 1970s. And I have some vague memories. My memories start around the time that Watergate happened, when Nixon would then eventually resign not too long after that. So by the time we got to Iraq and Afghanistan and all that sort of thing, it had long been documented that we keep sticking our nose into places where it's good to support, but it's not necessarily good to send our soldiers and fight battles in other places. So I never had, so add on top of that I'm first generation on my father's side. My dad was born in Germany and just barely got out of Germany with 4 relatives before Hitler kept chasing him and those 4 relatives across Europe. Everyone else in my family died in the concentration camps. So the whole concept of war, to my father, all he wanted to do was hide us. I was raised in an environment where we, as we like to say in our family, we hid in plain sight. We never talked about our religion. We never, and military was something we were never told not to do it. It was just, it wasn't even a conversation. We were as far away from that as possible. I've tried not to share that onward with my sons. I try to make them give their own decisions, but students of history. So that as I grew up watching things like Vietnam and learning about Korea and then seeing the same mistakes being made in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's no surprise that they're just a reflection of me in terms of not having any interest in military service whatsoever. And I agree with you, Chad. There are times to stand up and defend and fight for a cause. I'm not sure I've seen them yet. I think I've seen a lot of desire to control natural resources, which is why we spend so much time in the Middle East. It's not a question of this country cares a lot less about human rights than we say that we do. We fight wars because we want oil, because we want resources, because we want power. And that's just the nature of human stupidity. And that's some of the stuff that learning about Korea and living through the end of Vietnam taught me. Afghanistan and Iraq were just replays of the same thing. They really are. Getting drawn into the Ukraine conflict is different only because, like I said, Russia's actually there as opposed to using other troops as other countries as their puppets. That's why it's so dangerous right now. When they're actively involved in a war, it's much, much different. We've never seen this in our lifetimes. We haven't seen this since World War II.
Yep. So just a couple of comments. I was thinking about the MASH, and if you remember the song that plays, usually it's an instrumental, but if you listen to the lyrics that go along with that song, they're pretty telling of how people felt about the war. I can't remember how they all go, but if you have a chance after the podcast today, take a listen to that. And another thing I remember when I was in college, it was the first time we went into Iraq, and Jello Biafra from the Dead Kennedys came to our campus and spoke. And I remember I went to it, and I remember he had the spoken word tour. He was kind of like doing what Henry Rollins did, but he kind of did it, I think, first. But he even had stories about he and Henry Rollins. It was pretty funny. But he had this poem, and it was like, "Die for oil, suckers, suckers, suckers." I still remember that him saying that, and he just was saying, "Oh yeah, you think we're over there for this? Well, think about it from this perspective." Mm-hmm. And it was interesting how he brought that to light. And one other thing is, when I was also in college at this time, there were 3 soldiers from different conflicts. One was from Vietnam, one was from, I want to say it was Libya, but I cannot remember exactly. And one was from Nicaragua. And they were 2 of them were pretty young guys. The guy from Vietnam was a little older, but he was talking about just how he says, we're there. And he says, I had a lot of friends that died. He was just talking about how it was all for resources. And then the guy from the Middle East said he was brought over to the Middle East, and he said he was doing some reconnaissance. And he said he actually got into a fight with some guy, and it was a hand-to-hand combat, and he said he killed him. And he said then after that's when that military base, they had a car bomb or something that blew up this Marine military base. But then they came to me, and they had changed my date of entry into the country they had moved it back days, so that even though I had this altercation with this guy, they changed my date so that I could not say that, because the papers would not support it. And then the other guy was like a young guy talking about being in Nicaragua and how they were in a firefight. And he said it was around Christmas time. And he said, I had Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies playing on my Walkman. And he said, and all of a sudden they started firing on us. He says, and I got this playing in my ears, and I'm sitting there trying to kill people. He said, just the irony was so crazy. But then he said the other thing that they did is, but you go to the middle of this big field, and he said there'd be a plane landed there. He said there'd be all these guys in suits, and he said, and they were all named Mr. Smith. And he said we just had to load all the stuff up for them on these planes. They would take it back to the United States. And he was insinuating cocaine. So it's just interesting how these 3 guys got together and were talking about their experiences during war, and some of it not being what you would expect. But now I expect it, I guess. But at that time, I had a little less expectation of some of the things that go on behind the scenes.
Well, there were drugs coming out of Vietnam too.
Oh yeah,
pretty much proven that there was a ton of drugs that were brought out by the U.S. government out of Vietnam. So
yeah,
I know we've all kind of got some things to do. I think that's a pretty good place to stop for the week. We can pick this up another time. Anybody got anything to add before we head out?
Let's hope we don't have to explore the topic of Ukraine that much further in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Yeah. So interesting topic, I think. And, like I said, all due respect, I got a lot of respect for the military folks and appreciate what they do.
You got me now singing in my head. We'll follow the old man no matter wherever he'll go from White Christmas.
So, from all of us here at Dad's on Life, take care, everybody.
Yeah, have a
Take care,
good
guys.
one.
Have a
Have a good
good week.